guys, welcome back to Slowly Slapping Slots and our redstone testing world for this video. Before I go over to the vertical redstone signals, I'm going to do that thing that every YouTube channel does and ask you to hit like in this video. Engagement with the video really helps with the YouTube algorithm, and I'd love it if you could hit subscribe on the channel. I really want to get to 1,000 subscribers so that I get more control over the adverts that YouTube runs against my videos. I'd love to be able to turn off all the ads, get rid of that annoying pre-video ad or the mid-roll ads that YouTube just automatically slots in. So if you'd consider helping me out with that, then you'll get value from it eventually once I get to remove all my ads. So thanks. So let's get over and have a look at sending redstone signals up and down. So we've got our vertical redstone signals behind this wall. I've just built this to stop the rest of the world in the background distracting from the video. I'll put a world download in the description so that you can play with these vertical signals. I'll probably just upload my whole testing world and you can have a play with whatever you want. But let's take a look at sending redstone signals up and down. So over on the left, we've got various ways of sending a signal vertically up, and on the right, various ways of sending the signal vertically down. And we'll start with this one, which is your basic redstone dust going up a staircase or a series of blocks, and with dust connected all the way up. This is pretty much the first thing you'll think of when you start thinking of sending a signal up and down. It does have some advantages. You can send the signal up and down using this method. So that sends it down and that sends it up, which is quite nice and can be really handy for some things. You can re-strengthen the signal with redstone torches, and we'll probably talk about that shortly. But this is your most basic vertical signal method. The next two are a variation on that. So essentially we've got half slabs here, and your redstone signal can travel between the half slabs back and forth zigzagging up. Again, you're limited to a height of 15, and this can only send the signal upwards. The redstone doesn't send the signal down to the slab beside it. And using glass, you can actually build a zigzag and send the signal between the blocks. So with any solid block, this would cut off the signal by having this corner here, but glass lets you send the signal through the corners. And again, you're limited to height of 15 before your signal runs out. Next, we've got your basic redstone tower, redstone torch tower. So it's a series of blocks with torches in between, which go on and off alternately, and then when you power and depower the bottom block, the signals get inverted, and you can obviously send your redstone signal up. And this is nice because you can have an infinite height signal. Now we get on into the more interesting ones. We've got a piston with slime blocks and a redstone block, and then another piston with slime blocks and a redstone block. So it's pretty obvious from looking at it, but when we flip the switch, piston extends, pushes the slime blocks up, and pushes the redstone into the next piston. So this is nice because it's pretty compact and it can be extended infinitely all the way up to build height. I've made a fairly compact version here, but you can have more slime blocks between the piston and redstone as long as you don't go above the piston push limit of 12. So you can have up to 12 slime blocks, well, 11 slime blocks plus the redstone block gives you 12, and we'll get to it in a second, but you can use exactly the same thing to send the signal downwards. And the next one is a variation on this, except we're using logs and leaves. So if we use a sticky piston to push a log into these leaves, the redstone signal gets sent upwards. And the reason this happens, and I just found out recently, is if we use Masa's MiniHud mod, we get sort of an enhanced F3 screen, which is fully customizable. You can add all sorts of info that you want, but the thing we're interested in here is the distance statistic, so second from the bottom, where it says distance 7. So if we move our log against those leaves, it turns to distance 1. So that's measuring the distance between, or how far the leaves are from the nearest log. So as we go up, the distance increases all the way up to 6. So the segments from this one are not as big as the slime blocks can be, but it does have some useful advantages in certain circumstances. It looks a bit better, so you can potentially blend it into your builds a bit more than this, but it also doesn't need clear space around the sides. Because these are sticky pistons, you can't build it against a wall or with any blocks touching it, whereas this one, you could just have a one wide 1x1 tube that all these could sit inside all the way up. And again, you can build it as high as you want. And another nice feature of this one is the observers, which detect the block change. They can be placed at any point in the tower. So you could take the redstone signal out at multiple points all the way up. So if we do that, we can see this observer is triggered. This observer is obviously triggered because it triggers the next piston for the next log. And the ones at the top are triggered. So one thing to note, and we'll see it again in the later builds, is when an observer is used to detect a block change, it only sends out a 1-tick signal. It's worth reading up on redstone ticks a little bit. If you're interested in redstone, you'll come across the phrase redstone ticks fairly often. So if we do that, the observer sends out a tick, which triggers this redstone lamp. But if you want an on-off switch, this obviously is just a little redstone flicker. If you want an on-off switch, then if you place a sticky piston in front of that 1-tick, the 1-tick isn't long enough for the sticky piston to hold on to the block. So using a redstone block, we can move it against a redstone lamp or the start of a redstone line or whatever else we want to power, and we can turn that on and off by that 1-tick coming out of the observer every time the state of the leaves changes. So a single tick into a piston only gives it time enough to push or pull, but not both. I'll have linked the Masa's MiniHud mod in the description. He has another few mods which are brilliant as well, especially Lightmatica. I'll not get into all the uses of that here, but I have a video specifically on using Lightmatica. So if you're interested in building schematics or using schematics to model your builds or to copy other people's schematics, then have a look in the description. I'll put a link to it. And I'll also have schematics for all of these builds in the description as well that you can download and load into your world with Lightmatica. So our next option is, it's a bit weird. I wouldn't use it if I needed to rely on the redstone signal 100% of the time. It is an arrow in a dispenser. So you'll see there, I'll turn off Masa's MiniHud. The arrow that was shot out of the second dispenser missed the target block. So these target blocks, the closer the target block to the dispenser, the more reliable it'll be. These are about 6 apart and they hit maybe 95% of the time. But because of the random variation in arrows coming out of dispensers, you're gonna miss maybe 5% of the time. Oh, there's another one. Maybe it's slightly more than 5%. So, oh, another one. Goodness me. Your arrow will hit the target block, which triggers the next dispenser, which fires the next arrow, and so on, all the way up. But the more you have of these in your tower, the more chance there is of one of them not hitting and your signal not getting all the way to the top. And you can obviously place the dispenser on top of the target block or to the side. It'll power it either way. And again, I wouldn't use this if I needed a reliable signal. You also need to make sure the arrows get refilled in the dispensers. The next one we've got is probably my favourite when sending a vertical signal, and that is a bubble column. So we've got soul sand here with water source blocks all the way up, and you can use the kelp trick to get source blocks from flowing water. And if you don't know what that is, you place a bucket of water right at the top and then plant kelp all the way up the column, and that turns each of the blocks into a water source block. Then once they're all source blocks, you've got bubbles going up, and you can't really see it with the glass in the way. But this is a bubble column all the way up, and we've got observers here to detect if the bubble column changes. So if we use a dispenser with a bucket, we can pick up one of the source blocks, the source block directly in front of the dispenser. We can pick it up or place it, and the observers will immediately detect the change of the bubble column. So if we take away this source block, this water source block, then the bubble column will stop at this point. It only goes up as high as there are water source blocks, and that's detected immediately by the observers. And again, we've got one of these observers sticky piston on off switches. So one thing to note, if you need an immediate detection of the state change or an immediate instant redstone signal, you can't have your dispenser sucking up the water directly above the soul sand. If the water on top of the soul sand is placed or removed, it takes about a second, maybe slightly longer, for the bubble column to start and stop. So if you want a delay in your redstone signal by about a second, then absolutely place your dispenser just above the soul sand to suck up that water. Otherwise, place it anywhere else in the column and it'll be an immediate signal. Again, you can place observers at any point in this column, like the leaves. You could have multiple observers, doesn't really matter. And you obviously don't need glass around this, so you can do it with a 1x1 hole as well, just like the leaves. So our next one is, this one's quite expensive in terms of redstone components because you need so many observers. You've got a power reel here, which you turn on with a button or another redstone signal to trigger it, and it sends the observer notices, sends it upwards. So what you could do is alternate power rails and observers, and the signal will be a bit cheaper, and the signal will still travel up. And again, this isn't an instant signal because the observers have to pass it one to another, but it works pretty well. And another favorite, I really like this one as well, is the scaffolding tower. So scaffolding changes state depending on whether it has a block underneath it or not. To be fair, this one is fairly fragile. If someone hits the scaffolding, then your whole apparatus falls down. But if we press the button, you can see as the trapdoor disappears, the bottom of the scaffolding appears, and that state change gets passed all the way up, so this can be infinite out as well, and gets detected by the observer. So that is all of the sending redstone signals upwards that I currently know. Let's have a look at the ones for sending it downwards. So let's start with my favourite, and the one I use all the time. It is the wall with a piston. So if you have 3 walls in a row, a column of a 3-wide wall, you'll notice that this middle wall segment is flat all the way down. But if you place another wall on top of that, it's no longer flat. You get this little bump, and that's detectable by an observer. So you can use a piston to move that wall back and forth and turn on and off. whatever's at the bottom of the wall. You could also use other blocks. It doesn't have to be a wall. If you're triggering it from the very top, then it has to be a wall that moves on top of this middle segment. But if you're doing it from the side, then you can use any solid block and it will turn on and off the that middle bump in the wall. And you can do it at any height if you're placing it to the side. So this is the one I use most. It's excellent, and again, we've got that observer sticky piston on-off switch. The next one is fairly basic as well. It's similar to our tower of pistons for sending, our tower of redstone torches for sending a signal up. This is the equivalent for sending a signal down, and you've got a redstone torch on the side of a powered block, which powers some redstone dust, and it doesn't matter whether it's a square or circle, which powers some redstone dust, which powers or depowers a torch on the side of that block, and that carries on downwards, and you can just send the signal up and down, or send the signal down. And again, this one's infinite. You can extend this down as far as you need. Then we have our piston and redstone tower, very similar. Well, I tend to go to the vertically upwards one. This is for sending a signal down. It's just the opposite to that one. Just put the pistons at the top and the redstone block at the bottom. Then we have the same thing with the leaves and logs. So won't spend much time on that. We've got the same arrows and dispensers. This one tends to be slightly more accurate going downwards. The arrows are going quite fast coming out of the dispenser, so they don't have as much time to move off center. And the next one is, it works surprisingly well, but it's fairly basic. It's just a dropper that drops an item into a hopper with a comparator to pick up the signal. So if you can have a 1x1 hole going down to bedrock, stick a dropper on top and a hopper at the bottom, and you can get a signal. And then we have our downwards version of the observer and power rail. So we power the block above the rail, which is detected by the observer, which poops out a little redstone signal into the next rail, and so on all the way down. The next option is truly wireless redstone, and it's awesome. So before we had skulk sensors, we had this as the first proper wireless redstone. So using two daylight sensors, we'll go down and look at this circuit closer. So both set to nighttime mode, going with comparators coming out of them, one in subtraction mode, so they're essentially comparing the strength of these daylight sensors. And by moving a block above one of them and removing it, the signal strength difference is passed through, and that triggers this redstone. And this can be infinitely high as well, as long as this block moves on top of and away from the daylight sensor with the subtraction comparator coming out of it. So this is ingenious. I love this. And the last one is pretty clever too. So we use a sticky piston to move a block from in front of this observer. The observer detects it moving away and coming back. So it sends two fairly quick pulses in succession into this dispenser. And for anyone wondering, I'm using a Hermitcraft texture pack, which makes the dispensers and observers and things look weird. Apparently they're supposed to look like mumbo jumbo, but this is all for my son's benefit. Anyway, the observer sends two pulses into the dispenser, and the dispenser has a water bucket in it. So it essentially sends out a drop of water, which gets picked up by this observer, and obviously sends out a signal. So those are all the methods I know of sending a redstone signal vertically up and down. If you guys know of any more, add them to the comments below. Keen to learn more and add more to my collection of vertical redstone in my testing world. I'll put a world download in the video description. It may be my whole testing world, it may not. We'll see, depends how big the files are once I zip them up. And I'll also stick some Litematica schematics for these things in the video description. Again, worth checking out Masa's mod. Back again soon. I've got a few more videos lined up, which will be uploading in the next few weeks. Some nice technical redstone stuff if you're interested in that. And again, if you'd consider subscribing to the channel, that'll really help us out when it comes to managing the adverts that YouTube tries to show you guys. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.